This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Turkey's parliament approves military deployment to Libya. The AU congratulates Guinea-Bissau for a peaceful election as Zimbabwe is declared winner. And walking on cold water, thousands in Tunisia take part in an age-old tradition to usher in the new year. Hello and a warm welcome to Africa Live on CGTN. I'm Lindy Mtongana in Nairobi. And with me in studio is Hannah Vivier with a preview of your business news.
Thank you so much, Lindy. Well, indeed, making headlines in the world of business. Kenya's largest lender equity group to delay purchase of 4 African banks. And young Libyans train as pastry chefs as state jobs dry up. That and more news making headlines in the world of business later on. But for now, here's Lindy.
Thank you so much, Hannah. Well, in our top story, Turkey's parliament has approved a bill to deploy troops to Libya in support of the embattled United Nations recognized government of national accord. The decision has paved the way for increased military cooperation from Turkey, despite criticism from opposition legislators. According to Turkish Parliament Speaker Mustafa Sentop, the legislation passed with a 325 to 184 vote. The Turkish parliament cut short its winter recess to address developments in Tripoli, where GNA-aligned forces are countering a renewed push by Khalifa Haftar to wrest control of Tripoli. Haftar's Libyan National Army launched an offensive in April, but its advance was brought to a standstill by pro-government troops. Well, to discuss this further, we're now joined live by our correspondent, Michal Bardavid in Istanbul. Michal, thank you so much for joining us. Of course, Turkey's parliament has now approved the military deployment to Libya. Tell us more about the decision made in parliament today.
Yes, certainly. This was actually the expected result. We were expecting that they were going to vote for at least a simple majority was going to be enough for this to happen, and it has. Now, the ruling Justice and Development Party, known as AK Party, of course, fully supported this motion, which was given by Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan. The same goes for the Nationalist Movement Party, MHP, which also has an alliance with the AK Party. So again, they also voted for this. The main opposition party, CHP, Republican People's Party, were against it. The Kurdish HDP party voted against it, and the E party, known as Good Party, also voted against it. And during the debate, there was a statement made by CHP main opposition leader Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, who called on the government to work for the establishment of a United Nations peacekeeping force in Libya. He stated that Turkey must take the lead for efforts to establish stability in the region and concentrate all diplomatic efforts in that direction. So that is what Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu really wants, diplomatic efforts instead of a military intervention. But just to give a note regarding the decision-making process right now, Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan will have full control of it. He will have control over the extent, the scope, and the timing of potential deployment of troops to Libya now.
And it's certainly no small decision, just given Khalifa Haftar's advances in Libya and certainly the kind of international support that he appears to be receiving. Isn't then this something of a gamble for Turkey to get so involved in supporting the GNA in Libya?
Well, it certainly does appear to be a gamble, but according to Ankara, it seems they don't see it that way at all. Now, during the debate today, some AK Party officials stated that they believe the presence of Turkish troops in Libya, just even their presence, would be a deterring factor for the Libyan National Army, so Haftar's forces, who are there trying to fight the GNA government of national accord that Turkey is supporting. However, what's more important also for Turkey is the presence potentially of Russia, because it is one of the main backers of the Libyan National Army. So once again, Turkey and Russia will come face to face in that term, where they are going to be supporting a opposite sides in this major conflict. And we know that in the Syrian conflict, when Russia got involved and supported the Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, he tipped the balance basically in favor of Assad and made a major change in the Syrian conflict. So the same could really happen here with Russia's support. That's a major risk for Turkey. Turkey does not want a conflict with Russia. The two countries have major economic and security deals in play right now. We're talking about security in terms of Turkey purchasing the S-400 missile defense system from Russia, billion-dollar deal there. And also on January 8th, Russian President Vladimir Putin is also expected to visit Istanbul to launch the Turk Stream pipeline project for Turkey as well. So really, it's important for Turkey to keep a major sensitive balance with Russia, but it seems that they believe that this was worth taking the risk and getting involved in the conflict.
And certainly, Michal, when you talk about a potential standoff between Turkey and Russia, it really goes to show that this is far more than just about Libya, with many countries having interests in the country. How is Turkey's involvement now, or Turkey's decision to deploy troops, likely to affect not just Libya, but indeed the wider Eastern Mediterranean region?
Well, Turkey's strategic moves within Libya really makes a difference in that region as a whole in different aspects. Now, even before this decision to send the troops, in November, Turkey had signed a maritime boundary agreement with the GNA, the Government of National Accord, which is UN-backed. So that made a major significant potential economic gain for self-interest for Turkey. However, that infuriated Greece. Now, today, at the same time, Greece, Israel, and Cyprus signed a major deal for the East Med pipeline project. So that's also very significant. However, now the maritime boundary agreement that Turkey signed with the GNA also covers some areas that the East Med pipeline that Greece now plans to build with Israel and Cyprus. It also covers some areas in that, and it crosses their path. So that really creates a major conflict for these countries as well. It's going to be very complicated. That already made it complicated. Now with the potential sending of troops, that is also going to make a major difference in terms of all the countries that are supporting the opposite side, the Libyan National Army as well. So it's really a massive deal for all the people in the region and all the countries involved.
Indeed it is. Well, thank you so much. That was very informative. Michal Bardiva joining us there live from Istanbul. Now, in other news, the African Union says those opposing the election results in Guinea-Bissau should do so through legal means only in order to maintain peace, law and order. Former Guinea-Bissau Prime Minister Umaro Sissoco Embalo has been elected president after winning a runoff vote against another ex-Prime Minister. Domingos Simoes Pereira has complained of fraud, telling supporters that at some polling stations, the number of votes exceeded the number of registered voters. CGTN's Daniela Pearson reports.
The announcement of Umaro Sissoco Embalo's presidential victory has sparked celebrations in Guinea-Bissau.
Votos nacional. Domingos Simões Pereira.
National vote, Domingos Simoes Pereira, 254,468 votes, equivalent to 46.5%. Umaro Sissoco Embalo, 293,359, equivalent to 53.55%.
The 47-year-old Embalo will succeed incumbent President Jose Mario Vaz, whose tenure was marred by political infighting, a poorly functioning parliament and corruption.
Guinea-Bissau now has a President of the Republic from this January the 1st, and it is I, Umaro Sissoco Embalo. Guinea-Bissau will stop being the country you have known, a Guinea-Bissau where anyone does just anything. That is over. That is over. Never again. Guinea-Bissau will be a respected country. There will be respect for each citizen, and no one will be excluded.
As the newly elected president, Embalo has the task of creating political stability and curbing widespread poverty in the West African nation.
I will make this country one in which everyone will contribute directly or indirectly towards reconciliation and mutual confidence. Never again will this country be divided.
There were 12 presidential hopefuls in this race, but Embalo's main opponent was Domingos Simoes Pereira, who lost by a margin of just 7%. He was also another former prime minister and the candidate for the ruling party. Pereira has been challenging the election results and says he will take the case to the Supreme Court.
The people of Guinea-Bissau deserve to be told with certainty solid results which correspond to the will expressed at the ballot box.
Since yesterday, I am in the street. How dare they steal victory from Domingos? What has Domingos done to them? He won the elections and they have been stolen from him.
Mbalo now faces the difficult task of modernizing Guinea-Bissau. The West African country of 1.6 million people has suffered 9 coups. Daniela Pearson, CGTN.
Well, let's get you more now on the outcome of the elections in Guinea-Bissau. We're joined by Dr. Gideon Jalata, a political analyst, as well as the Chief Executive Officer of the Center of Excellence and International Consult based in Addis Ababa. Dr. Jalata, thank you so much for joining us. Let's start with your assessment of how these elections were conducted. The AU has hailed them as peaceful, but that, of course, was against the expectations of violence and chaos, just based on the country's political history.
Yes, thank you very much for having me. As well known, the Electoral Commission has already declared that the president-elect. So, with against the political history of the country, some kind of post-election crisis may be expected. But it's important to recognize that the African Union has already hailed the election, as well as ECOWAS. So it's important to understand the context, what's happening in ECOWAS region in West Africa, which means once the Electoral Commission has declared the result, it's a mandatory for all groups to accept the result. We see what happened in the Gambia, how Yahya Jammeh was forced after the Electoral Commission declared. So though the post-election crisis is expected, but it's a must to accept all the parties.
Indeed.
Of what the Electoral Commission declared.
And Dr. Jalata, just looking at that result, Pereira got 40% of the results in that first round of the elections, and of course has now lost this second round. What do you make of that, and especially the African Union's call urging him to use the courts to challenge the results?
Yes, once the Electoral Commission has declared the result, it's for both parties. If there is any inconvenience, they have to go back to the court. This is the democratic procedure. Indeed, Pereira won in the first round with 40%, followed by 27% of the president-elect. But now the president-elect is leading than Pereira. So the procedure is to go to the court, and the court will decide, whether there was fraud in the election or not. Mm-hmm. As I said before, now the democratic space is expanding fast in Western African countries. So in this context, ECOWAS also said that its troops are standby if there is any contradiction against what the Electoral Commission has declared. And so in this context, I think any party that thinks that they lost the election has to go back to the court.
Indeed.
And see what the court will decide.
Do you think that the courts will be impartial, particularly considering the fact that Pereira's party has ruled Guinea-Bissau for over 40 years and has at times had very tight control of state institutions, including the judiciary?
Indeed, when you see the history of the country, you see the dominancy of the party over the governance institutions of the country. But once the Electoral Commission has decided and declared the result, I think it won't be a challenging. The main challenge could have been the Electoral Commission to decide the result. Once the Commission has decided the result, I don't think it will be difficult for the court to decide and see, verify the facts and decide on the result of the election.
Right, thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Gideon Jalata, for that political analysis of the situation in Guinea-Bissau, joining us live from Addis Ababa. Now, turning to news here in Kenya, at least 3 people have been killed and 3 others injured in a suspected Al-Shabaab attack near Kenya's coastal town of Lamu. The incident took place on Thursday at the Nyongoro area. Lamu County Commissioner Irungu Macharia says the attack was targeting a bus which had come from Mombasa and was headed to Lamu. The driver of the ill-fated vehicle refused to stop and sped off, forcing militants to shoot at the bus several times. Transport along the Lamu-Garsen Road has been suspended as security agencies comb the area. Well, time now for a short break. Here's what's still ahead on the program. An Ivorian town is sinking underwater as coastal erosion advances. And how community sociotherapy is helping Liberians tackle mental health challenges.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
We start in Hong Kong now, where police say around 400 protesters have been detained after a New Year's Day march turned violent. Police say the arrests were made on charges of unlawful assembly and possession of offensive weapons.
Some of the rioters, they refused to leave and continue to throw hard objects at our officers. At this juncture, some of my officers gave warnings to these rioters not to throw hard objects, including bricks, including paint bombs, and also water bottles. Since they ignore our warning, some of our officers were worried about their own personal safety, and actually 2 handheld tear gas grenade was used to disperse the rioters right in front of them.
2 HSBC bank branches in Hong Kong city centre were closed on Thursday, the first working day of the year, after protesters vandalized the premises and left graffiti sprayed on the walls. 7 indoor ATM clusters were also closed. HSBC says cleanup efforts are underway. And shifting to the Middle East now, the ongoing protests in Iraq have killed more than 250 people and are taking a huge toll on the economy. The protesters are demanding jobs and an end to what they call corruption. Iraqi Prime Minister Adel Abdul Mahdi wants that the unrest is only making things worse, as it's costing the economy billions of dollars. One particular industry that has been hardest hit since the protests began is the private sector. This as businesses face losses from disruptions of markets to merchandise damages. However, critical revenue-producing oil exports are continuing, though foreign investors have pulled out of a number of energy deals. And to Cote d'Ivoire now, where coastal erosion threatens to cause immeasurable damage. Locals are bearing the brunt of the destruction. Most have lost their homes, their livelihoods, and even ancestral burying grounds. CGTN's Wilkista Nyabwa has more.
The pain of watching your ancestors' remains drift out from cemeteries to the sea. That is the painful situation that residents of Lahu Panda town are grappling with. Unwavering coastal erosion has crashed into this once famed colonial town, washing away graves.
Today we live in anguish. What will happen tomorrow if no one comes to the help of the village? We will disappear. But today it is our dead who are living. You know, in Africa, our parents and ancestors are very important to us, and to see them scattered in the sea is heartbreaking. And every day that God brings to us, we are haunted.
When coastal erosion began in the main town of Grand Lahu, residents were forced to relocate 18 kilometers inwards. That did little to solve the situation. But that's not all. Businesses have slowly died down in the past 3 decades as more structures submerge underwater.
We used to sell woodin. There were several businesses that came to bring their goods here, and all the shops fell into the water. You need to look here. This is the prison. There where the stones are. There, the stones you see in the water now. That's the prison that is there. The sea took everything.
The summer house of the country's first president is amongst the very few grand buildings still standing. Locals are calling on the government to include Grand Lahou on the list of UNESCO protected sites, but experts say it is too late.
The old city of Grand Lahou cannot be on the UNESCO Natural Heritage List. It doesn't exist anymore. At the time, they rang the alarm to see what could be done with that part of the city, but all these historical buildings are now gone.
What you need to do in the Grand Lahou is to plug the bridge at the level of the cemetery. Open up in front of Bandama River so that the water can then flow there and put things in place. Dam so that the water does not snake around. Then the water can go straight into the sea. This is what needs to be done. That is all. It's feasible. Technically, it's feasible. It's just a question of costs.
Côte d'Ivoire has in the recent past witnessed increased flooding and coastal degradation. In the coastal city of Abidjan, erosion and climate change are threatening major economic infrastructure. The government and World Bank are calling for more funding to mitigate this threat. Bulkisanyabo, CGTN.
Well, like many other developing countries, Malawi has a youthful population, but among the majority who are unemployed, many are forced to find alternative solutions for work. Youth groups have now taken to upcycling scrap aluminium to produce kitchenware. CGTN's Daniel Arabmoy brings us more.
From the molten material, the youth fashions pots, spoons and frying pans, which many customers describe as durable. The skills needed to produce useful tools out of scrapyard metals are easily transferable. Just like that, the boys who suffered the pangs of youth unemployment are breaking the mold.
I started this workshop alone, but I later on thought it would be a good idea to share my skills with other youth who are interested to learn new skills, and now we are growing in number. I see a bright future for these young boys.
Job creation for Africa's youth remain an uphill struggle, as 2 out of 5 economically active youth remain unemployed in most countries across the continent, including Malawi.
According to the International Labour Organization, unemployment affects 1 in 4 Malawians aged below 35 years. The youthful entrepreneurs buy disused car engine heads, rims and other redundant aluminum parts. The metals are heated to melt in a traditional oven. These youths have not only created employment for themselves, they have created employment for middlemen who order and resell the pots to different parts of Lilongwe city and surrounding districts.
I need money for my tuition, so instead of sitting at home doing nothing, I come here to learn.
You are seeing others, the young players, they have a benefit because of this way. Instead of going, instead of like gambling, stealing, begging in the streets, they can come and training this. After that, they can find the benefits because of this way.
The factory uses files to shine the outer side and small knives to smoothen the interiors. Everyone has a role to play. These young men in the outskirts of Lilongwe are gaining valuable skills and an economic lifeline that is making a difference in their lives.
This job may not be the very best, but it has helped me put food on my table. I am able to pay my house rent, buy clothes and other necessities in life.
Despite the positive stride the youth are making, liquefying the metals consumes large amounts of charcoal, a phenomenon which is wiping out forest in the outskirts of the city. But the young entrepreneurs are looking forward to the day they will upgrade to cleaner and environmentally friendly sources of energy for heating up the metals they rake from the streets. Daniel Arabmoy, CGTN, Lilongwe, Malawi.
Grief and trauma are still common in Liberia, a country that is haunted by a civil war and an Ebola outbreak that killed over 4,800 people. Experts believe that a tenth of the population suffers from mental illnesses. But for a country with only one registered psychiatrist and few health workers with adequate knowledge of mental illnesses, community sociotherapy is helping fill this gap. CGTN's Susan Mongeli reports.
My name is Prince. When I was 14 years, rebel forces attacked my hometown. We were in the house. They attempted to set our house on fire. As a young boy, they immediately took me with them because at the time they had lost many soldiers in the battle. I did not participate actively in the war, but I was their errand boy. And yes, I witnessed a lot of bad things. I always feel terrible when I remember.
Prince's story is by no means unique in Liberia. He's just one among tens of thousands with symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder, brought about by the civil war and further deepened by the Ebola crisis.
When it started, my daughter complained of a high fever. I took her to a health center here. They could not treat her, so I brought her back home. After a week, the Ebola team came and took her away to the treatment unit in the community. In the evening, we went to check up on her but didn't find her. We were told she had been transferred to the main unit and it was confirmed she had Ebola.
Her daughter eventually died, as was the case with thousands of Ebola victims in the country. Both the civil war and the Ebola outbreak left deep scars. In the case of Ebola, communities were quarantined, leading to a lack of trust and social cohesion. ZOA International, in partnership with YMCA Social Welfare, has been leading a program on community-based sociotherapy as a way to rebuild trust.
It's a project that molds the minds of people, that brings people together to solve problems, to be able to solve problems at the community level instead of going to court. You are almost something like counseling. You talk to people, I'm able to solve my problem. If, for example, you have an experience and I bring my problem to the group, you'll be able to explain to me how you overcame your problem in the past.
Participants attend weekly sessions for 4 months, led by a trained local facilitator.
The program works for everybody, people who are Muslim, people who are Christians. We come together to discuss our problem. People who are mentally ill, people who have this kind of mental disorder because of things that happen in their home, because of violence. We also have to do with SGBV, people who are being abused by their husband, people who are being abused by their wives, and people who abuse their children. So the program teaches people how to conduct themselves in the home, how to handle their homes, how to take care of the home, how to live in harmony and peace.
Such sessions have been replicated in various parts of Liberia, and not only do they provide a means of healing wounds of the past, but also promoting social cohesion, which is very critical for a country like Liberia as it seeks to chart a new path.
More than 10,000 people across the country are expected to participate in the program by the end of 2020.
Since I came in contact with social therapy here, I have begun to feel happy again because I interact with other people who appear to want the best for me. It takes my mind off those issues that happened before. I'm now being introduced to issues of safety. It has really motivated me, and I can say now I feel I can make something out of myself.
To say yes, I can make it.
However, there are those that argue that such programs are not doing enough, and that accountability and bringing perpetrators of war to justice is the only way to bring about deeper reconciliation. But without a war crimes court as recommended by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in 2009, community-based sociotherapy appears to be the only chance at bringing peace and healing to Liberia, at least for now. Susan Mongeli, CGTN, in Monrovia, Liberia.
You're watching Africa Live. Let's go now to Hannah Vivio for your latest business news.
Thank you so much, Lindy. Well, coming up in business. Kenya's largest lender equity group to delay purchase of 4 African banks. And young Libyans train as pastry chefs as state jobs dry up.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Business in Africa is at the crossroads, where opportunity meets innovation, where profitable new markets collide with global trends. From the sound of an African bell on a stock market's floor, to the shout of the trader in a bustling free market. It's colorful, vibrant, and exotic. CGTN stands at the gateway to Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. From Morocco to South Africa, we talk to the deal makers and actors who fuel its engines of growth. Only on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. It's time now for your business news. Let's start global business tonight right here in Kenya, where the country's largest lender by customer base, Equity Group's purchase of 4 African banks is expected to delay. The setback comes after the bank failed to reach a buyout deal with London-listed investment firm Atlas Mara. According to Equity CEO, the binding term sheet has expired as the two parties are yet to sign detailed transaction agreements. In the share swap deal, Equity will acquire about 62% of the share capital of Banque Populaire de Rwanda and 100% of African Banking Corporation in Zambia, Tanzania, and Mozambique. In exchange, Atlas Mara was to get shares equivalent to 6.72% stake in the bank. In the meantime, Equity says it will pursue further discussions with Atlas Mara to reach mutually acceptable commercial terms. Let's shift focus now to Nigeria, where a financial blow is staring Africa's most populous nation in the face this new year. Nigeria's current debt stock is at roughly $83 billion. However, given its massive debt service provision, that figure is set to rise to about $22 billion in 2020. The situation could worsen if anticipated punches from the global economy like Brexit, the US-China trade war, and the interest rate policy of the Federal Reserve Bank hit below the belt. Nigeria's revenue challenge has remained non-responsive in the last 5 years. According to data from the nation's quarterly economic report, that revenue crisis does not seem to be getting any better either. Well, Turkish police have detained 7 people, including 4 pilots, for helping the former Nissan boss Carlos Ghosn travel to Lebanon. Ghosn faces multiple charges of financial misconduct in Japan. He, however, broke bail and fled the country, touching down in Istanbul en route to Lebanon. It's not yet clear how Ghosn, who is said to hold at least 3 passports, was able to reappear in his home country of Lebanon. It's reported that it took 3 months for him to form his escape plan. Meanwhile, a French official says the country will not extradite Ghosn should he arrive in France. Ethiopia's Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed and Tan Jian, the Chinese ambassador to Ethiopia, have visited the construction site of the beautifying Shega project. The initiative aims to develop Addis Ababa's river systems and surrounding areas. It's part of the Prime Minister's plan to clean up the city, generate jobs, as well as build service and green economies. The project envisions building parks, bicycle paths, walkways, planting of trees, and development of urban farms. At the request of the Ethiopian government, the Chinese government agreed to provide grants to develop central parts of the project. The first stage of the initiative is expected to be completed in May 2020.
We have started this project 3 months ago. Within this short period of time, no one expected to see such huge progress. This could be a great model for us on how to execute such mega projects timely. This place is crucial in connecting the overall beautifying Shegar project and changing the image of Addis Ababa.
The Chinese government has agreed to provide the financing of this project.
And we see this as a friendship project between our two countries. So this year marks the 50th anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic relations. So this is a friendship project, and I believe that with a project like this, our relations will be further enhanced. And people visiting here, people touring here, they will appreciate the friendship and the contribution by the Chinese government.
Well, for many, going to university and nailing down a field job, a study-related job, is a dream goal. However, that ambition doesn't resonate with a handful of Libyans. CGTN's Mohammed Abubakar now explores how more and more university graduates in the northern African nation are resorting to work in the private sector as state jobs dry up.
By the looks, Belghazim Abdussalam seems to be enjoying baking cakes, but the reality here is far from it. After several attempts at finding a job in Libya's oil industry, Abdussalam had to give up on his dream. Instead, the engineering graduate took a pastry course at a private training center. He's now a full-time worker in this busy Benghazi cafe.
If I had worked based on what I studied, I would have worked as a petroleum engineer.
When asked of what he thinks of being a pastry chef, well, Abdussalam's answer was a sentiment for all in Libya.
It is a much better and stronger source of income. You can't rely on a government salary here. It doesn't do anything.
Most Libyans are civil servants. However, the state has been hiring less as it continues to be engulfed by the raging conflict. Jobs in the sector have also become scarce over the years as foreign companies exit the northern African nation. For now, training centers like Sarah Bashir al-Zawi's are a common sight across Libya as they try to improve the lives of many, particularly the youth. As an accounts graduate herself, Sarah's story isn't that different from her students.
I graduated with a BA in accounting 8 years ago, but didn't get a job. 4 years ago, I launched this project. I imagined that if I had waited for the state to employ me, I would have stayed at home for 8 years. That's why I support the idea of youth standing up for themselves instead of waiting for a $500 salary without taking any steps.
With a Bachelor of Arts in Economics, another alumnus of this confectionery course is 30-year-old Nabil Muhammad al-Mabrouk. Nabil started his own cake business to supplement his father's state pension of just about $321. For him, making 3 or 4 cakes is equivalent to half of a state salary.
I didn't benefit anything from my BA in economics. I applied for work in many banks, but I wasn't successful. I haven't benefited from the state either. These hands of mine are what gives me my income.
Libya's private sector has a long way to go before it can provide enough jobs for all. But for the likes of Nabil and Abdussalam, little places like pastry centers could help many make a decent living. Mohammed Abubakar, CGTN.
Well, let's shift focus now to Brexit matters. The UK's Parliament has given initial approval for British Prime Minister Boris Johnson's divorce deal. The move paves the way for a January 31st departure from the European Union. However, as our correspondent Andrew Wilson now reports, the bigger challenge ahead for Johnson is uniting a divided Britain.
A new decade with a new government and the extraordinary twin tasks of leaving the European Union and restoring public faith in politics. The projected economic growth figures are weak, and UK industry has been hit by 3 years of uncertainty. There is much to do.
We have already seen Boris promising to fulfil his manifesto pledges on the NHS, on the environment, on housing and police. But he is also now promising to invest money outside of the wealthy capital and southeast and into the severely neglected infrastructure and jobs of the rest of the country, who are now his new electorate.
But perhaps the biggest challenge is the Brexit timetable. On January the 31st, ratification of the Downing Street deal should be complete, ending 47 years of EU membership. By March the 1st, talks will begin in earnest, a fight on both sides for a new trade agreement to form the core of the new relationship. There was some expectation post-election that Boris Johnson might defy conservative hardliners and soften his position on Brexit, go for a more closely aligned free trade agreement with the European Union. But not only is Downing Street talking up what it is calling a clean break, but the Prime Minister himself has ruled out any possibility of an extension, insisting by year-end 2020, success or failure, the job will be done. In June, there will be a summit for the UK and EU 27 members to assess progress, if any.
Where is Britain's place in the modern world? Is it going to be a deal which more or less keeps Britain within the satellite of the European Union? Or are we going to strike out a very different road? And here I would suggest that, maybe one of the things that's lacking is any vision about where Britain is going to go. Not just tagging along with the United States, but for instance, in relation to India, in relation to China, in relation to other emergent economies.
By November the 26th, the European Parliament will expect a trade deal, negotiated, translated and presented, ready for ratification by the end of the year. If by December the 31st this isn't forthcoming, Britain crashes out and falls back on basic WTO terms, tariffs on goods and little or no special border cooperation. This would be the no-deal scenario that Boris Johnson pledged to avoid.
Rapid development of China's high-speed railways in 2019 has helped weave a huge transportation network that now covers some 35,000 kilometers. CGTN's Yu Yang reports.
It's China's latest mass transit milestone. China's high-speed railway mileage reached 35,000 kilometers. Both construction and operation scale now rank first in the world.
People themselves now have more desire to travel, to see our beautiful landscapes. The original railway could not meet travel demand or requirements, which promoted the development of our high-speed railway technology and network construction.
Over 5,000 kilometers of high-speed rail has been opened during the past 12 months, hitting the opening peak of the past 4 years. In central China, the completion of the sections from Zhengzhou to Xiangyang, from Shangqiu to Hefei, brought high-speed rail to some small cities along the route. And the Yibin to Guiyang line has made it easier for people from poverty-stricken areas to travel around the country. Officials say China will continue to pursue high-speed railway technology and speed up EMU trains.
We are working on technology innovation, experimental verification, and the safety concerns of higher speeds, as high as 400 kilometers an hour. We will provide a time frame after getting a comprehensive demonstration of the needs of the national economy, the needs of the people, the safety verification test, etc.
Currently, over 5,000 high-speed trains run daily across China, transporting more than 5 million passengers in less than half the previous time. And in 2020, about 2.7 trillion yuan, or about $0.4 trillion will be invested into the transportation development. Nearly 30% of it will go to the railway sector. And this provides a solid foundation for the country's railway networks to keep rolling on. Yu Yang, CGTN.
Well, that's all the business news we have for you for now, but keep it here. I'll be back on Global Business at the top of the hour, where we will look at the delayed plan by Kenya's largest lender by customer base, Equity Group's purchase of 4 African banks. The setback comes after the bank failed to reach a buoyant deal with London-listed investment firm Atlas Mara. That and more stories making headlines in the world of business later on. But for now, here's Lindy.
Thanks, Sarah Tanner. Well, let's take a short break. Here's what's still ahead on Africa Live. Coming up, walking on cold water, thousands of tourists in Tunisia take part in an age-old tradition to usher in the new year.
Join us in Global Business and see Africa through our eyes. The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Panater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Over 1,000 Tunisians and foreign tourists have gathered at the beach in the coastal city of Bizerte in northern Tunisia. They took a dip in the cold water to welcome the new year. People also practiced aqua walking, one of the most beautiful beaches in the Mediterranean basin. CGTN's Adnan Chouachi has more.
The weather conditions were perfect for swimming on the last day of the winter holidays. The water was cold, but people enjoyed the joyful atmosphere.
Tunisia has 1,300 kilometers of coast. Our goal is to spread the word and invite millions of people to take a dip, swim and practice sport in this period of the year.
Professional swimmers assert that repeated exposure adapts anyone, including the most vulnerable, to the cold.
Encourage people to swim in winter. They'll not be sick for the rest of the year. It lashes the veins, arteries and capillaries. It forces blood to the surface and pushes the cold downwards.
Aqua walking is a trending and popular sport in Tunisia. A competition was organized for professional athletes, retirees and hundreds of participants.
I'm 50 years old. I took part in the aqua walking competition. It's an international sport. Walking in water is easy. It improves physical capacity, endurance, strength and heart health.
This sport is gaining in popularity across Tunisia. We're opening new aqua walking clubs nationwide. Walking in cold water on the first day of the new year is a unique experience.
The annual sporting event has revived the city of Bizerte, north of the country. Children took part in the celebration that Tunisians hope will continue throughout the year. Tunisians believe that braving the cold and swimming on the first day of the new year will bring health, fortune and good luck. This is an ancestral tradition which is now being revived in dozens of coastal cities, towns and islands across the North African nation. Adnan Chouachi, CGTN, Tunis.
In Burkina Faso, music is helping a convict to transcend the confines of his cell in the capital Ouagadougou, as CGTN's Mohamed Abubakar reports.
This correctional facility in Ouagadougou is home to Burkina Faso's latest musical find, Roland Tapsoba, aka Rolby.
I am here at Ouagadougou prison for fraud. I was convicted and sentenced to 60 months in prison. I have so far done 36 months, 3 years, and I have 2 more years left.
There are more than 2,000 inmates here with sentences ranging from a few months to life in prison. According to this budding musician, his new path not only gives him a sense of purpose, but also something he's looking to pursue full-time.
It's normal that when you do something bad, you end up in prison. But I think it's better to prepare for your exit. I have achieved my objective already, and I'm always looking forward to do so even after prison. I can go on and also, why not, support other convicts.
Tapsoba says his passion for music started even before he went to prison. But once convicted, it took him a while to find his inspiration again.
Once you accept that you're in prison, you start to accept other things. So really, I had a lot of ideas for the lyrics and everything, but at the beginning, I was a bit stressed. But after a while, I thought, no, why not start now?
It's during the weekly music lessons that prison guard Karim Ouedraogo noticed Tapsoba's talent. I think I detected a hidden talent, so I approached him and we talked and he agreed, so I gave him a guitar. He plays it often and creates his own compositions. You saw it, he immediately played with his fellow prisoners, and I think it's great for him and it's also great for us. With support from Freeman Tapili, A Burkinabe reggae star, Tapsoba has been able to record 4 songs. Through his music, he hopes to inspire the youth to go and work, be proud and live simply. Mohamed Abubakar, CGTN.
And coming up in your sports news, up next. Egypt is set to start using VAR technology in its domestic league.
How would you create